G'day everyone, welcome to Zero Waste Victoria's arts panel, exploring how the arts can inspire, move and empower people for change. Obviously, this goes way beyond zero waste, but this is just the beginning. This is where we're starting. And my name's Charlie McGee. I'm hosting the panel today, which we have some amazing people to speak to the zero waste and beyond paradigm. But I just thought I'd start with a little song, because I guess I've been using art or music specifically to try and communicate these things through song over the past 7 years or so in my band Formidable Vegetable. So speaking of the waste theme, I thought I'd start with a little tune called There's No Such Thing as Waste. Well, when I was a little boy, I liked to catch the rain, while people all around my town watched it flow right down the drain. But because our little shed in the bush wasn't on the mains, the only water we had to use was in a tank caught from the rain. 'Cause there's no such thing as waste, only stuff in the wrong place. That's right, there's no such thing as waste. Misusing water's a disgrace. Then I moved to the city, rented a house on my way to buy a bed. But I saw one lying on the side of the road, so I took that one instead. And I also found a fridge, a couch, and a big old sewing machine in the biggest pile of thrown out stuff that I had ever seen. But there's no such thing as waste. Oh no, only stuff in the wrong place. Yeah. No, there's no such thing as waste. Well, that old landfill's gonna be replaced, yeah. Then, down the track, I found out that diesel cars can run on veggie fat, so I bought a truck and hit the road, smelling like fish and chips. I rescued piles of veggie oil from the back of restaurants and said I'd be a fool if I bought my fuel when there's oil nobody wants. 'Cause there's no such thing as waste. Oh no, only stuff in the wrong place, yeah. I said there's no such thing as waste. Well, that whole idea's gotta be replaced, yeah. 'Cause we gotta refuse, reduce, reuse, repair and recycle. Yeah, refuse, reduce, reuse, repair and recycle. Now I dumpster dive to stay alive, and I compost every crumb. I save my seeds and eat my weeds and feed the leftovers to your mum. Gonna build a house from the rubbish tip, gonna keep this planet clean. Reuse ideas that have been around for years to live within its means. 'Cause there's no such thing as waste. Oh no, only stuff in the wrong place. No, there's no such thing as waste, only opportunity to be embraced. That's right. Yay! That's right, there is no such thing as waste. Thanks for joining us today on the arts panel of the Zero Waste Victoria Festival. This is the new wave of festivals, resulting in the previous wave of a certain pandemic that we've now found ourselves on Zoom. But yeah, today we've got a bunch of very inspiring artists and creatives on our panel who are going to speak to the ways in which we can use art as a tool, or music, or filmmaking, any kind of creative expression for spreading the messages of not just zero waste, but also environmental, social justice, climate action, all of the things that we need in this world today. And I'd just like to introduce very quickly our panelists. I don't know if there's a way we can get them on the screen as we introduce them, but our lovely background Zero Waste Victoria people might be able to figure that out. Today, we're speaking to Melbourne-based illustrator Carla Scotto, who's a designer, illustrator and animator of eco-sassy artworks, all on screen, on walls, and on funky things you can wear and put on stuff.
Yes. Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to talk to you. I'll just quickly move through everyone and then we'll get deep into it. We've also got another illustrator, Brenna Quinlan, who is an educator and permaculturist who strives to make the world a better place through her art and in her life. And with most of her work being in permaculture, it's, she's walking the walk as well as drawing the talk. So, live from Meliadora, the home of co-originator of permaculture, David Holmgren, we have Brenna Quinlan.
Hey, Charlie. Hey, everybody else. It's good to be here.
And I'm not sure if we've found him on screen yet. Corey Hancock, aka the environmental cowboy. Is Corey in the house, or is he out wrangling wild brumbies in the countryside somewhere?
He's probably still out remote
he's out
doing his
Corey's
environmental scientist work. He'll try and join us if he can.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we'll speak to Corey Hancock, aka the environmental cowboy. But last but not least, we have Karin Ecker, who is an international filmmaker with a passion in giving social and environmental issues a cultural perspective, and through projects such as her Plastic Free Boy, also connect and inspire kids to care more about the environment. And she's racked up a modest 48 million hits on YouTube for the trailer to her film, A Breach in the System. So, no big deal. But how's it going, Karin?
Good, thanks, Corinne.
Karin, sorry. I should have. That's the thing with reading everything as text. Well, welcome to the panel. I'd just like to ask you first, Karin, from natural birth to kids cleaning up the oceans, you seem to have a vested interest in the interest of the next generation in mind. And so I'd just like to know what made you decide to go down the path of filmmaking, specifically to get these messages out there, if you're able to give us a little bit of a walkthrough.
Yeah, so actually I started off in the ocean. I used to teach scuba diving up in Cairns something like 28 years ago. And after living in Thailand, being a scuba diving instructor, and having grown up in a landlocked Austria, there was no ocean and the water was always on my horizon. So I followed the water, and I ended up realizing that filmmaking is a great way to reach a lot of people when I was asked to be in front of the camera for a documentary with a solitary dolphin in Belize. So there was a whole film made about me and a dolphin, and as all I knew about dolphins was the flipper image, and I thought, great, my best friend, I'm gonna have an amazing time. But it actually turned around, the dolphin literally turned around, and after a week of being my best friend, smacked her fluke into my stomach and grabbed my bathing suit and ripped on it. And first I took it very personally, and I thought I must be like the worst person on the planet that her dolphin does that. But I was so shaken by this experience that I needed some answers. So going back to Vienna, where I was living, I looked up some marine biologists and people who worked in cognition and behavior studies, and they said, what do you mean? You're so naive, it's a wild animal. And, they with each other ramble and have, it's not like all flipper. So what I realized was that what we usually know is what media tells us or what we're looking for. And I was interested to find out the truth. So in a way, I had to really go into the ocean and talk to scientists and find out what really happens with the dolphins. So I traveled around the world for a lot of years and interviewing scientists and marine biologists. So my mission was then to kind of create a bridge between the people who don't know to the science community, who don't know sometimes how to communicate science to people. And out of that came, just a storytelling mission of trying to bring all aspects together, not just one, but show many different ways and make a mosaic, and then hopefully keep the mind open that way. We know many different perspectives. And that is what you're saying is the cultural perspective I'd like to bring in, is the subjective, the objective, the scientists, the politicians. Now when we talk about plastic, everyone has a say in it. And Alian and I always experienced this thing, point a finger to everybody else. And if we could just listen to everybody's concern and what they've got to say, we would get an understanding and work it out together. So if that answers your question, I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, there's a strong theme in the building the bridge between science and the arts, and making it something that's accessible. And Brenna, your work does that quite a bit with your illustrations about permaculture and taking quite dense scientific content and making it into a simple little cartoon or illustration. I'd just like to hear from you. What first inspired you to try to make the world a better place through your art?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think part of it was seeing inspiring people. So I was traveling for a few years in South America by bicycle and hitchhiking and getting about that way as well, and started staying with people who were practicing permaculture, so growing their own food, activating their communities, really using what they do best as their form of activism, whether that's teaching, writing, art, singing, and other people who were dedicated to the cause of sustainability and climate action. And so watching how fun and abundant and creative their lives were as they were responding to the current challenges of how do we exist in this world as a human, how do we exist within the confines of our system in a way that's not just doing harm, in a way that's actually not even just sustainable but regenerative, a way that's giving back. And to me, this kind of idea that people could be a positive force in the world was so revolutionary, and I really took it on board. So that's behind my art, that sort of realization, which was over a process of about a year, changed the way I wanted to be in the world and influenced this decision that I made, that from now on, my skills, my passions, my work, my art will be put towards furthering the conversation around climate, around human rights, and yeah, in turn inspiring others like I had been inspired before that.
Thank you. Yeah, today, if you just joined us, we're with the Zero Waste Victoria online festival, presenting the arts panel with a few prominent artists, filmmakers and performers, talking about how arts can bring about change and inspire people to change behaviour, and also bring about awareness of some of these issues that we're seeing in the world. Carla, your art reflects your passion for the zero waste life, which we're talking about today, but it also delves deep into issues of feminism, decolonisation, climate change, and goes way beyond that. Just how powerful can art be in bringing about cultural change, do you think, from your perspective? Oh, we haven't got your audio. Carla, you might have to, yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. It feels a bit egotistical to say that I am powerful and invoking change, but I think art on a broader scale really can, and I think that's why I tried to make these visually appealing and digestible artworks that talked about a bigger issue, but maybe bridged the gap between people who weren't in the zero waste community and maybe people who were living as most people do without a second thought to the environment. So for me, like, I didn't set out with the intention to advocate for zero waste, because I wasn't aware of its existence until about maybe 5 years ago. So for me, working in retail, and like I had this day when we were mailing out orders, and a 30-centimeter ruler got sent out in an A3 size box, and something sort of clicked in my head, like, this is happening in every store in Australia. This is happening all around the world at the same moment when millions of people are buying things. And I started to feel like, I'm just an artist. How can I invoke some sort of change? I felt the need for everything I made to be useful or important instead of just aesthetically pleasing. I had this real need to give something back, because I was growing up and realizing that everything I knew about the world wasn't as it seemed when I was growing up and watching Disney movies, that it was way more depressing, and that was my reaction to it. And I think for me, I started out heavily advocating for waste reduction and waste awareness. And that was just a gateway to other forms of environmental activism, such as Indigenous land rights, human rights, feminism. And yeah, it became more than just illustration. It became about design as well. Yeah, does that sort of answer it?
Totally, yeah, and I really appreciate that emphasis on design, because I mean, in permaculture, that's what we try to do is redesign the system. I think that's the common theme of 2020 so far. And just for everyone watching, I'd just like to let you know that we do have a Q&A panel there. We'll be taking questions after this in the next 10 minutes or so. So if you want to add your questions for our panelists, we're speaking today with Karin Ecker, filmmaker, and Carla, Scotto, illustrator and designer, and Brenna, Quinlan, the permaculture illustrator and educator. So please do contribute your questions, and we'll try and get them answered after this. So we also want to give you the link to what exactly? Kirsty, give you the link. Oh, the link to the song, I'm assuming. Oh yeah, I played a waste song beforehand. So if you want to have a listen to that, head to formidablevegetable.com. Shameless self-plug over. Anyway, just putting it out to the panel now, I'm just wondering from your perspective around zero waste. Obviously 2020 has already been a massive year, starting with the climate crisis, bringing us the bushfires and the floods, followed by the COVID pandemic, and now the evident systems of white supremacy that are dominating the media. How can something like the zero waste movement connect us and inspire us to expand into working on some of these other systemic problems in the world? And if you want to speak to your art and ways that you're trying to do that, that'd be fantastic. But in general, something like zero waste, which can be seen as a very much household-based issue, how can we expand that out into the world to create the bigger change that we're after? I just invite anyone to speak to that if you feel called to.
I can go first. I thought it was really interesting, Carla, what you were saying about beginning your work as a kind of activist illustrator through touching on issues of low waste living. And I definitely had that as well a couple of years ago when I started putting out things through my social media channels, that I was talking about low plastic, low waste as a symbol for broader awareness of environmental and humanitarian issues. And it really is kind of, in a lot of ways, the gateway drug to thinking about things in a more holistic way. There are 12 permaculture principles that permaculture is based on. It's sort of, permaculture is kind of an ethical way of living. It's like a common sense, holistic way of being the best person you can be in this life and on this planet. And one of these principles is produce no waste. And making no waste is actually quite an exciting challenge. Some would say a difficult challenge. And it invites such a different way of viewing the world. If you look to produce no or realistically minimal waste, you end up thinking about maybe growing some of your food. You end up thinking about maybe using a compost toilet, or maybe keeping chickens, or ways that a worm farm so that you don't have any food scraps that are going into landfill. And it has this incredible web of run-on effects that over time, step by step, will end up changing your life from one that is very much in line with the extractive economy of, buying things that had to be produced and consuming, and then producing your own waste that then goes to that magical land that we know as away. And instead thinking holistically, so making something that you maybe eat, and then the waste goes towards making more things in the vegetable garden in the form of compost. So for me, produce no waste as a principle, or zero waste or low waste living as an idea, is actually so profound, because for many of us it's the first step. I can get a keep cup and stop using single waste coffee cups every day, and once I achieve that, the next week I start thinking, okay, what's next? It's a very powerful symbol of environmentalism and kind of sustainability or regenerative or permaculture living as a broader lifestyle.
Thanks, Brenna. Yeah, anyone else on the intersectionality of the zero waste movement with broader issues of social justice or environmental justice or climate justice?
Yes.
Yeah, Karin?
I'd like to have a go. I think I would even go back further, you know, climate change and we heard about all the plastic in the ocean and how it's going to affect us and the kids' future, and then the kids were standing up, and then we heard about governments saying kids shouldn't feel so upset because Greta is making them feel bad. And, you know, the idea is to tell positive stories, and to tell positive stories of like what you just said in terms of the kid cup. One of the first things is we got our own plastic-free white kid cup. We went into the shops and said, would you mind of selling the kid cup? And so we had like Byron Bay rules from the BP station to the local shop to the big pub. They were all selling the kid cup. So I think, you know, the positive story of that everyone can make a difference in reducing single-use plastic or doing some gardening projects. Aliana and I are now making films about gardening. Actually, we hear different solutions, we contact them, and we say, would you like to have a plastic-free boy talk about your solution? And in that way, kids who follow him can see, oh, this is cool what he's doing. Not only that he, you know, they really like what he's doing, that he's doing it because he's a kid, but then they will listen to things they might not actually hear because it's really in the domain of grown-ups. And I think if we get kids involved in the whole movement of creating no waste and maybe gardening and you know, then the message will spread. And I really loved some of the ideas yesterday that I heard of the tool sharing and something in Melbourne that was great. So it's about telling a positive story, because COVID makes us all feel gloom, and then the justice makes us all feel gloom, and everyone wants to say, well, it's bad, what do we do about it? You know, and if a kid can make it, anybody can make it. And as soon as you step into the solution, you're already part of the next phase, which is zero waste and taking care of each other, and yeah, in many ways we're connected.
Thanks, Karin. Yeah, it's an important thing to remember, especially with work around with kids and trying to get the message out to kids. I think the zero waste, you know, sort of paradigm is a great place to start. And like Brenna said, you know, the gateway to more serious issues and maybe some more adult concepts, which, you know, we're definitely seeing a lot of at the moment. Carla, did you have anything to add to that regarding your latest sort of recent work?
Yeah, so like I said previously, zero waste for me was very much the beginning, and it gave me awareness to larger systemic issues that we face in Australia, which you can see the frustration of people currently with the Black Lives Matter movement. And what my brain always goes like 10 years ahead, like most artists do. We tend to envision abilities of ourselves as artists that we can't produce at the moment because we're not quite there yet, or we're not capable of the skills. Like artists have this thing where they can envision their abilities to be much more advanced than they are right now, and I think that's why we maybe can. Oh, I'm so nervous. I don't know about you guys, but I'm like a bit nervous.
But can I just add something to that? What you said, Alian just went like this. That's you, Mom. But I also think that we envision the things, we can't do them just yet because it's not ripe. So you already know what's coming, and you're working yourself into that picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can create an artwork and it won't be as good as it is in my head. And I can envision a future that won't come fast enough for me because I'm quite impatient. And I think a lot of people have that sentiment at the moment. What was the initial question again?
Oh, look, we were just exploring the intersectionality between zero waste and bigger paradigms, but there's some questions coming through. So maybe if you guys are okay, we'll deal with a few of them. Maybe either, you know, Brenna or Carla specifically. Someone is asking, Chloe is saying she's a designer and wannabe illustrator and would love to create some products, but doesn't know how to do it in a way that doesn't cost the environment. She's wondering if you have any insight into looking into the future as an artist. What are some of the mediums that we're going to be using or replicating our work with?
Okay, I can go first here because I bombed the last question. So I struggle with this all the time because I have a store, I sell products, but I feel very hesitant about releasing apparel. I feel really hesitant about creating more clothes when there are so many mountains of clothing, like landfill, just sitting out there that I'm thinking about. So I produce stickers, like vinyl stickers that last a lifetime, basically. They don't go anywhere. So they're like miniature artworks, and I find they're really great for sharing your work or maybe getting a message out and they're a good way to maybe engage people who don't have a lot of income, so they can own a piece of artwork and it only costs them a few dollars. But I also donate a lot of my work. So that might be a good way if you're reluctant to create your own apparel and you're worried about the sustainability behind it. I donated this design to Clothing the Gap, and all the proceeds go to Indigenous health initiatives. So I feel like that the energy that goes into producing them is worth it, because I'm putting money, I'm directing money back into Indigenous communities. So often it may not be like, or selling prints is, I feel like you can do in an environmentally friendly way, but if you're worried about apparel, I feel like if you have a great artwork with a solid message, find a place to donate it and see if there's a marginalized community that could profit off it more than you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that into the foreground. That's there's a lot of different ways we can approach this, and you know, the waste thing goes deep. I'll acknowledge that, and we've got a bit of a question, more of a musing from Kai, who says maybe the wording should change. The word waste itself has a pretty negative connotation, and maybe they're saying they now call waste management material resource management to give it value. So if we start giving these things value and channeling the value into more regenerative areas like what you're talking about, then, you know, is it waste? Probably not. What are your thoughts on that, Brenna or Karin? Do you you know, have you got anything to add to that question?
Yeah,
of materials?
it was interesting, kind of accidentally becoming an illustrator overnight a couple of years ago, because I had lots of people say, oh, you know, merch is an avenue you should explore, and I believe that art is inherently, generally, a low emissions activity. It's a low emissions profession, and that artists, musicians, actors, filmmakers deserve to be able to earn a living, and sometimes that does involve merch. I wrote up a huge pros and cons list about all of the different items, and ended up deciding that for me it was best to only release things that were on 100% post-consumer recycled paper or cardboard. So that takes the form of prints, cards, postcards, recyclable stickers, and not go down the avenue of things that had a heavier footprint for a similar gain. So if the goal is to be able to support yourself financially, or to fill a need where people are asking, hey, do you have stickers? Do you have something? I want to buy something of yours. Keep that goal in mind and see how you can achieve it in the most environmentally responsible way. Because if I create something that will then outlive me in a landfill somewhere, for me, it's not worth the $5 I might have made from it. But also respecting that other people have different needs in their creative pursuits, and, you know, this is a journey for all of us. I know, Charlie, you've struggled with this through making CDs as a musician and merchandise as well.
Definitely, yeah. And for music, it's a whole other set of things, for each of our practices. There's just the nuances that you have to work out. And, it's the time for working these things out, I guess. There's a question from Serene Kitchen that I'd like to put to all of you, especially since you brought up the point, Karin, of providing a positive message for kids and for people who aren't ready to go, super deep. But because I'm assuming all of you have a pretty good awareness of what's going on in the world and the broader picture, this person's asking, how do you mentally cope when dealing with overwhelming data when expressing it through your work, especially when things sometimes look a bit hopeless? Would anyone like to give us a little bit of juice on that?
Yeah, I like taking new information in. That's one of the things that I like the most, to see how things are evolving and changing, and then putting a positive, a solution-based slant on it. So I think Alian and I are now quite good at it, actually, how to create a story, look at something and go, well, it's so easy. You just become part of the solution, and this is what you do. In the end, it's always the same. It's always the same answers. Educate yourself. Find out what you can do in terms of plastic pollution. It's the reusing, recycling. We heard already yesterday doesn't work, and we're not really promoting it either. But to make everybody feel like they can do something, that what they do will make a difference. Because most people that have told us, I do something, but then they won't do it. That's one of the biggest things that will hold people back. So it's kind of creating that feeling of, well, we're all doing it. We're all in this together. And it only needs, one kid needs to see that one other kid is doing it, and then they go and want to do it, and they run off to their parents. I mean, one time Ariane was on the street busking, dancing, and a woman was sitting down with her little kids, and the kid said, "Oh, it's plastic free boy." And she said, my kid has seen him in preschool in Sydney, and then again in year 1. And that was pretty amazing that the kid has seen him twice in 2 schools. And she said, because of your son, my son will not buy any lollies. All the money he gets, he puts in a jar, and he wants to give it to an organization that will save the planet. I mean, this is, for me, it's so, because as a filmmaker, and I can see how it spreads, and you've mentioned it before, that I've actually been lucky to experience 48 million hits on a YouTube trailer, and I can see how the message goes viral and how it spreads, especially if it's in the news, and especially if it's a story that everybody reads. It can easily be turned around as a collective. We are all in this together, and I think filmmaking is really great because you can show many other people solutions, all the people that are doing great things, highlight that one, highlight that one, highlight that one, and immediately you have people going, oh yeah, and by the way, when kids get it, they go to their mom and dad. Oh, yeah, very good. He tells all of the kids, you promised me you will not let your mom use reusable coffee cups, bags, and what was it? Straws. And they do it. They become real agents of change. And yeah, it's beautiful to see that everyone then comes on board.
Karin, there's just while we've got you, there's someone asking, Chloe's asking, as a filmmaker, is it hard to cover particular topics in the depths that you'd like to, especially since some companies might not want you to see what they are doing? Are there ways to get past that, especially with such a broad reach as you? Have you had any pushback to what you're doing?
Pushback in what way? Sorry, I didn't understand.
Well, I suppose from the corporations or powers that be who create products that turn into waste. I don't know, has there been any pushback, or has it been mostly...
In the beginning, it was all pushback. I felt like in the beginning we thought, oh, we're doing a good thing, but after a while we felt like we were the villains, and then that changed because the bags were gone, and in the beginning it was like, how dare you tell me what to do, and then the bags were gone, oh yeah, we're now part of the solution. So after 3 years, we are at a point where we're not having a pushback anymore because everyone is recognizing that we're doing the right thing. Even Allianz School, the principal first wasn't into changing the straws, and treated us as if we wanted to create unrest. And 2 years later, they put him up for a Department of Education Student Award. So he got the award. And in terms of cooperation, we did, and I won't mention the name, but a very, very big company that everyone knows, they asked Allian to become a spokesperson. And the marketing manager invited him down to Sydney, put him up in an amazing hotel, lots and lots of media. And I was saying, well, what do you want him to say? And I needed to first sign this, they wanted me to sign the contract. And I said, well, I need to know what you want him to say. And in the end, they said, well, we don't want him to talk about microplastic. And I said, I can't tell my son what to talk about microplastic. And they said, there is no evidence that microplastic harms the human body. And because there was no evidence, it was suitable for them because of their product that wouldn't be mentioned. And so I had to say, sorry, Allian, but I don't think it's a good idea. And he was not happy about it because at that point he's like, oh, they're so cool and everyone likes them. And yeah. And so now he understands further down the track that, you have to watch. You have to watch who you're going with. And Allian was going to speak at a ComSpon 2020 in Sydney on the 2nd of April, which didn't happen because of the lockdown. But it's a leading communications, marketing, and publishing conference where he's supposed to talk to the leading CEOs of marketing of how they can help him to create the change. So we were going, well, all these corporations, they're creating the problem. So how they're going to be a part of me? It's easier to go with all you guys, zero waste, because it won't be a problem, the old solution. But how do we get is this answering the question?
Yeah, sure. Well, perfectly. Yeah, and to be fair, not going with their big presentation or whatever it was they're offering has probably made more of a statement than if you had gone with them and said what they wanted you to say. I mean, I don't know, maybe from my perspective.
But you have to make a living. You have to make a living, like it was said already before. So this is where most people will go that way rather than that way.
It's a fine line to walk, isn't it? And I'd like to read out a comment from Costa. We've got Costa Georgiadis watching. Some of you may know him from Gardening Australia. He says the vocabulary we use sets the new dialogue. Resource recovery puts a value and new values on what has been called rubbish. Massive shift that is part of the momentum of change. Thanks for chipping in that, Costa. And yeah, thanks for telling us that story, Karin. I just want to head back to the question of dealing with overwhelming data or emotionally taxing information and turning that into art. Carla or Brenna, would either of you like to talk about, because you both have dealt with some pretty heavy things in recent months, weeks, days. Is there anything you'd like to talk about relating to current events that's really been a challenge for you to translate in an artistic way?
There's been a lot. I used to find it really debilitating reading a lot of media about the state of the natural world. And I got to a point where I would just read so much of it, not in a way to desensitize myself, but to be so wholly aware that I could do something about it. So yeah, it's all about finding, I feel like, the truth. For me, like growing up and realizing that things aren't the way I thought they were, especially with our Indigenous heritage in Australia. I was stunned to not have learnt about it in school, and how that directly correlates to the mistreatment of country. That just all ties into colonisation and how we don't listen to Indigenous people and how we don't take on the thousands of years of knowledge that they have with treating the land with respect, so that we have a mutually beneficial relationship instead of this one-sided disaster we currently find ourselves in. So I definitely understand this sort of feeling of overwhelmingness, just like being completely overwhelmed by an article about the trapped methane being released in the Arctic ice. That kept me in bed for 2 days. But there's just there's always a way to perform an action to not only feel better about yourself, but your small corner of the world. And I think zero waste is an excellent way to do that, because it's very easy for someone like me who gets very stuck in their head to be so concerned about these issues that I as a person cannot change, because they are systemic, heavily politicized issues that I as an individual cannot undo myself. But the beauty of zero waste is that we can make our small section of the world feel like how we envision the future. So yeah, lately this bombardment of news has brought me back to the fact that I just need to try and do my best and make my surroundings as great as I want the future to be.
Thanks for speaking about that. And yeah, I think, you know, it's all about each of us doing our best. That's the key in all of this. Lizzie Smith says, as artists, you can influence a direction for us to travel towards. So I want to thank you all for being on our panel today. We've run out of time, but thanks very much, Karin.
You're welcome.
And Carla, thanks so much for your contributions. Brenna, Quinlan. And stick around, because we've got a screening of Karin Ecker's film Plastic Alarm, featuring her son Plastic Free Boy after this. So just with our last few seconds, is there anything any of you would like to add to close, or sort of, you know, give us a little bit of something to leave with?
Yeah, I love the way, Karin, you and Carla, you are both not only being agents of change yourselves in what you do best, but inspiring others to be agents of change. And I think that's what it's all about. Whenever we feel like it's all too much, the best antidote to overwhelm is action. And so finding out what your first action is, it might be zero waste, it might be planting something, it might be having climate conversations around the dinner table with your friends, or starting a book club. Find out what it is, do that, do it well, do it in a way that's sustainable for you, with a bit of downtime, be kind to yourself, and that's going to make the world a better place and make you feel a bit better about the overwhelm as well.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of yours, Brenna.
Mutual.
Well, thanks so much to everyone for watching. Thanks for joining the arts panel for Zero Waste Victoria. Sorry, Karin, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the film, if anyone is watching it now, it was made 2 years ago. So Alien is a lot smaller, and it was before the bags were changed in the supermarkets. So just bear that in mind. And a lot of water has gone down the bridge, and he's traveled and climbed up steep hills since then. So I just wanted to let you know it's and then also what I wanted to say, Brenda, on what you just said. I think community and having other people, connecting to other people who are on the same journey, is so important to give each other the strength to keep going. I think it's one of the most important things, actually, in this whole movement.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. And thanks, Zero Waste Victoria, for holding this festival, even though we can't be together in person. It's great to get these little charges of inspiration and solidarity with people making art for a resilient and regenerative future. Thanks to all of you for doing what you do. And don't forget to check out the rest of the events put on by the Zero Waste Festival mob. And thanks so much to everyone for organising it. Thanks, Emily and the crew.